Games are truly amazing, from their intricate design, their immersive worlds, and their mechanics that make them so gosh dang fun. I love them. They also have massive social benefits according to Dimitri Williams, who found relationships formed through games are found to be more intimate and closer than those made in other online spaces. Yet despite all that, I kinda hate gaming right now. Like seriously, I actually can't stand it. I know regardless of how much research I have done, and I have done a lot, or the points I'll make, people are gonna leave me hate before they even watch the next minute, nope, the next second. And I'm aware there are more important things going on in the world right now, but if you've ever felt that there are real issues in gaming, or that they can be better for everyone, maybe stick around.
Gamers, please open your Rockstar energy drinks and let's game.
I want to clarify, when I say gamers, I'm not talking about everyone that plays video games. I mean, according to some surveys, that's like 35% of the planet, and probably most of my audience. But not all of you. Hi, Mom! What I am referring to is a very vocal part of the community that promotes hate, alienates people from the hobby, and represents gaming to many people for all the wrong reasons. A report released by Unity shows that 72% of people who play games have witnessed toxic behavior, with 68% personally experiencing it. And in a study conducted by Frontiers in Psychology, half the participants felt that gaming was more toxic than more traditional means of social media. While this can just be annoying others in games by griefing, there is a wealth of far more worrying behavior that literally makes headlines. Voice actress Laura Bailey and her infant son received death threats for her role in The Last of Us Part 2. Two Genshin Impact voice actors received racially charged comments after speaking out about the sexualization of their characters. Starfield was boycotted for having pronouns in its character customization, and earlier this year, UK police launched an investigation into a metaverse sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl. You may have started to pick up on a pattern here. The targets are usually, if not exclusively, marginalized groups: women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ+, and this isn't coincidental. The Unity report even outlines most toxic behavior in games is sexual harassment or hate speech, and multiple papers, articles, and research materials as far back as 2012 have found gaming culture suffers from chronic racism and misogyny. Now, you may be asking yourself,
why?
Elitism is kind of baked into gaming's core. From console wars, the PC master race, which uses the same language as actual Nazis, obsession with in-game rank, and a weird amount of financial shaming. Many would argue that it's just a bit of fun. However, the worrying part is for a lot of gamers, the sole media they consume is video games, meaning that this kind of hate is their only interaction with these groups. It's also instilled in gamers a sense of ownership over the medium, which has created an echo chamber in the space that immediately greets change or anyone that doesn't conform to the image of a gamer with hostility. For example, this year people were up in arms over the inclusion of real-life samurai Yasuke in Assassin's Creed Shadows. Gamers claiming that the offending issue isn't the black guy. Nah, dude, it's historical inaccuracy, and for companies to stop pandering to non-gamers while they're at it. However, this quickly falls apart when you realize this is a series that made up descendants of King Leonidas for you to play as 2 games ago, has admitted to being historically inaccurate in-game, and has had ancient aliens and magic present throughout. Yet the historical inaccuracy that can't stand as a person of color who was real. Multiple arguments have needed to be written to question why dragons are more believable in fantasy than people of color, such as Tariq Moza for Polygon. Women too have received similar treatment by gamers. Both Spider-Man 2's MJ and Aloy in Horizon Forbidden West were claimed to be some kind of hideous beasts upon reveal, and I'm not saying you have to like these characters, but when you remember they're modeled on real people's faces, and someone made up rumors that MJ's model was in a car crash to explain the way they look, that's kind of fucked up. Not to mention the insane standards it sets when they fix them. It tells the gaming community that women only exist to be visually admired, and those that don't conform aren't worth the time. And that all these angry dudes are only attracted to the one woman. Seriously, why do they all have the same face? But man, the mere idea of LGBTQ+ people in games, that's when you see that these people getting mad are just giant babies.
Fucking pronouns! Fucking gender ambiguity! Fucking current day Californian shit!
I forgot he was crying the whole time in that video. It's not just that these reactions perpetuate discrimination towards these groups by saying that they do not belong in the space, but by being their primary issue, it creates the false narrative that this is the only thing wrong with gaming, which is just not the case. Let's see how quickly it takes for those supposedly offending items to pop up in Starfield. Okay, first just gonna buy the game and... oh, that's a big file size. Okay, just wait for it to install.
2 hours later.
Just so people are aware, I'm not joking. I cleaned my house, got lunch, and ate while this was happening, but the issue is apparently the pronouns, not the ridiculously unoptimized file size. Oh sweet, it's done! Yeah, that crashed my PC. That's bad. I mean, not as bad as the pronouns, apparently. If you have better luck than me and do get the game going, you still have 10 minutes of unskippable, boring tutorial before you get to the character creator, where you're probably going to spend another 10 to 20 minutes worrying about the highlight of your armpit hair. And even then, if you present as a masculine character, it's still going to default you to male pronouns anyway. It's almost like it's not a real issue and ignores the problems the game may have. Like, oh, I don't know, buggy gameplay, inconsistent mechanics, and this war crime of an Irish accent.
Well, that's what I'm here for. Let's see what we're dealing with. You look to be in fine shape. No help needed.
But this has always been an issue at the heart of gaming. Outrage, not dodgy Irish accents, that's a more recent thing. In the early 2000s, there was this indie game called Pokemon Crystal. It was like a director's cut of a sequel of some Game Boy game about like a mouse or something. I don't know. I don't think they were popular. Anyway, it added the option to play as a boy or a girl?
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Gamers lost their mind, they took to the streets, they flipped cards, oh, no one actually cared, and it turns out girls like cute critters, so it was a huge untapped market? But girls don't play games, right? Wrong. According to research from our old pals at the Entertainment Software Association, or ESA if you're feeling naughty, in 2015, 44% of gamers identified as women, and that those over the age of 18, you know, who would have likely played Crystal at release, are more commonplace in gaming than men under the age of 18. Not only are there more women gaming than real gamers would lead you to believe, they're also more committed to the games they play. A 2023 report from gaming mental health advocacy group Take This found male players were more likely to quit games or avoid them entirely based on their in-game treatment than women were. Pro players like Overwatch's Giguri was accused of cheating and had to prove her skills and integrity time and time again, yet when similar claims were made of her male counterparts, they weren't scrutinized to nearly the same level. And fighting game pro Aris Baktanis? Hang on.
Bactanians.
Good enough. Claimed that sexual harassment is so integral to the FTC, to remove it would be like removing the football from the NFL. For those wondering why he said something like that, it came in response after he sexually harassed a player on stream. It'd be fair to say that gamers disproportionately hate certain groups. But hey, it's not like they're terrorists, right?
I saved Princess Peach. I wanted to be the guy, and I became the guy. I am a gamer. And I always...
According to a Europool report, video games and associated platforms like Twitch, Discord, and Steam have been increasingly used in the dissemination of far-right extremist propaganda. This is supported by a Vice article from 2017, which found Steam hosts forum for the Nordic Resistance movement, who were implicated in several bombings between 2016 and 2017. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue found another 45 groups with similar agendas on Valve's marketplace, with the largest having just under 4,500 members. And in 2020, the EU Counterterrorism Coordinator theorized that online gaming platforms could replace traditional social media for recruitment efforts of alt-right extremist groups, with the European Commission finding instances of this happening less than a year later. Dozens of nationalists get together to play and spend that time interacting with like-minded people. This gives everyone an excellent opportunity to make new nationalist contacts. In short, it's a free and easy way for us to meet online and network with one another. For those not in the know like I was before doing all this research, Patriotic Alternative is a British neo-Nazi group. So yeah, that's... Why are we here? Just to suffer? There's also been multiple organized threats of violence by gamers. As recently as 2023, a community meetup for Rust hosted by its developer had to be cancelled after they received death threats. And according to producer Alistair McFarlane, community-facing team members see this kind of thing daily. While many would argue they're all talk and no one got hurt, that's a best case scenario, unlike swatting. No, you're not squashing people with a comically large fly swatter, as fun a Looney Tunes style punishment as that would be. Instead, it's falsely sending heavily armed police to someone's house. Why? I guess some people find it funny to have someone publicly detained without cause? Where it became not so funny was the case of Tyler Barris in 2019. After losing a COD match with a $1.50 bet, Barris decided to swat his opponent in Wichita as revenge. Police then raided, shot, and killed Andrew Finch. But the real tragedy? Finch wasn't even the attack's intended target, as the cops went to the wrong address, a worryingly common occurrence on no-knock raids. Make no mistake, swatting is a form of terrorism used to silence the victim, either through fear or death by cop, and became so commonplace the LAPD stopped posting swatting statistics in order to dissuade copycats. It is a form of violent censorship against those gamers don't agree with, and it's not their only tool to do so. For those who don't know, and are probably happier people for it, Gamergate was a grassroots movement that claimed to strive for more ethical games journalism, with the name being coined by Adam Baldwin on Twitter back in 2014. Yes, the guy from Chuck and Firefly, life is weird like that. Naming it 2 days after they had doxed feminist frequency director Nita Sarkeesian so badly she had to flee her house. Frank Lutz of Gamasutra had a very apt description of the whole movement. Gamergate is an inarticulate mess of confused feelings, uninformed opinions, and second and third order meta arguments. They attacked developer Zoe Quinn over her game Depression Quest, having it removed from Steam. Jen Frank, a freelance journalist, pledged to quit writing about games due to sustained harassment, and Tariq Moza, who we mentioned earlier, and is an actual ethics lecturer, came under attack after posting his article about The Witcher 3, and was doxed and harassed to the point he left social media.
Very ethical!
But this was just a warm-up, as eventually Gamergate began to bully major companies into removing support for various gaming outlets in an effort to end them outright, such as Intel with Gamasutra and Adobe with Gawker. Gamergate actively terrorized individuals with sustained harassment, doxing, and swatting, and it worked. Journalists and individuals within games were too afraid to even broach the topic to avoid the shit show that assuredly followed when even mentioning it. While many within Gamergate continued to argue it was about ethics and objectivity, they blatantly ignored the fact that they were actively censoring people and intentionally targeted marginalized groups.
Very ethical!
In 2014, former NFL punter Chris Kluwe and actress Felicia Day both decided to speak out about Gamergate. Kluwe in a Reddit AMA where he berated anyone even tentatively associated with the movement and was extremely combative towards Gamergaters in general. Seriously, some of this reads like a Kendrick diss track. Do I get my Reddit gold for that joke now, or? Day's Tumblr post, on the other hand, focused on the solidarity within gaming and a desire to foster a community that focused on a shared love of games and didn't even directly mention Gamergate at all. Take a guess how they reacted to her piece. If you also guessed her home address was leaked a day after she posted her article, you'd be wrong, because according to CNN, it happened an hour after. Kluwe noted how Day's treatment was indicative of Gamergate's true nature as cowards that bully women, and in his AMA predicted that the whole thing was so fragile it would only last up until it gained attention from something like South Park or The Daily Show, which is kind of what happened. After a series of reports from Colbert and BBC highlighted how rotten and hateful the whole thing was, it quickly began to lose open support. The final nail being a parody of the whole thing in Law & Order SVU, where it was characterized as a group of crazed lunatics who hate women, led by Toby Turner. Which is great casting, because he's been method acting a similar character for years in his private life. Gamergate's lasting legacy will likely be the fact that they've made harassment of women in the video game industry impossible to ignore. It's become a completely insular network of paranoid reactionary gamers who just want things to go back to the way things were before they had to exist in a world where women played games and outlets wrote about more than just fun factor. While Kuchera's words might suggest that things got better after 2014, that is most certainly not the case. And as games researcher Anne McDivitt explains, she still faces pushback for her academic work and noted that for a large portion of 2020, she had to plead with Reddit to get a post targeting her taken down. She also highlights how other women and members of the LGBTQ+ communities have continued to face harsher treatment than her post Gamergate. The movement may be dead in name, but the spirit of it very much endures. Also, do gamers know what objectivity means? Game reviews, by their very nature, are entirely subjective. The only way to make them objective would be to only look at games on technical merit. However, seeing as how reviewers have been boycotted for lower scores of games that had technical issues, they only care about ethics and objectivity if it doesn't align with what they think. Now, I'm not saying games journalism is perfect. It's really not. I've climbed on IGN before, and many journalists make the representation push at the worst possible time, setting that movement back even further for the sake of cheap clicks. No one was gonna get behind the hate for Stellar Blade's big booties. While game reviews are biased, you're kinda missing the forest for the trees. Publishers, they're the ones that hold the power in the relationship. Gamergate claims to be about ethics and journalism, but you're not going after the root of the disease. You're going after a symptom. If you were really concerned, you'd be boycotting publishers, not the people who cover them. When a site is dependent on sponsorship money and game codes provided by a publisher, and that same publisher can control as much as the game's initial reception and review scores as possible, there's no doubt that there's a conflict of interest there. How could you not think that sites like Nintendo Life and Push Square are anything but biased to the consoles they're inextricably linked to? Which leads me to my next point.
These days it's not about collected cans of creamed corn and childish platforming. Now it's all DLC and microtransactions and you. Do you want a chicken nugget?
All of this just works.
It might seem from the last section that gamers are the whole problem in gaming, but developers and publishers don't exactly help matters. I believe that very often it's not really the player that's an asshole, it's the game designer that made them an asshole. If you spend every day killing one another, how are you going to be a nice guy? And he's right. During my research, most games considered toxic adhere to this idea. Call of Duty, League of Legends, Valorant, World of Warcraft, and Overwatch to name a few. I'm not saying that the violence of these games is the problem, there's a deeper issue that's exacerbating the whole thing. Christopher A. Paul notes in his book Why Gaming Culture is the Worst, the problem is meritocracy. Put simply, meritocracy is the idea that everyone starts from the same place and is rewarded and acknowledged based on their individual merit. It is theoretically a good idea, and games have wholeheartedly been incorporating it for decades now. Things like competitive ranking, leveling systems, and gear score all denote a player's skill and value. Notice, however, I said it was a good idea in theory. The issue with meritocratic systems is that they often ignore the advantages and disadvantages you come into them with. In the real world, this would be like coming from money versus coming from a lower socioeconomic background. Games, on the other hand, ignore inherited skill, the fact that some gamers have the means to play the latest release day one, access to high speed or even semi-decent internet connection, which as we saw from my Starfield install, I'm sadly missing, or the fact that some people may not be able to engage in high-level play due to physical limitations, essentially leaving newer and less privileged players at a massive disadvantage, and game design has exacerbated these issues for years now. For instance, I love Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I'm terrible at it, and a big part of that is how much the game relies on you having experience not only with 2D fighters, but the Capcom v Marvel games in general. Sure, I could just spend hours practicing, but I'll never be able to get past arcade mode without cabling, and I can't imagine getting any better. Well, not unless they re-release it.
This one's gonna take you for a ride.
Holy shit.
It's where the get good mentality comes from, and no doubt contributes to the pushback over games trying to accommodate a wider audience. Because in the eyes of gamers, these people haven't earned the games they play. However, neither did they. Prior to the video game crash of the 80s, gamers weren't really a thing, not like they are today anyway. Arcades were an attraction for the whole family, and marketing for consoles like the Atari and Commodore targeted that same demographic. Appealing to a single gender only really came from trying to cater more to a game-specific audience, like with Miss Pac-Man. Oh hey look, girls always liked games. They weren't just present in the arcades. Women were instrumental in the early games industry, such as Atari's Donna Bailey, creator of Centipede, and Roberta Williams, co-founder of Sierra and co-creator of the King Quest series. As were people of color, another seemingly non-gamer demographic. Jerry Lawson, an engineer, is credited with creating the interchangeable cartridge system popularized by the Atari and NES. Ed Smith helped develop the Imagination Machine, one of the first computer console hybrids, and Muriel Tramis is considered to be one of the first black female game directors, and still one of the only ones I could name. However, after the 80s video game crash, things started to change. Nintendo decided to advertise the NES as a toy to avoid the negative association with games consoles. Toy sections at the time were segmented by gender, forcing Nintendo to segregate gaming to fit into their marketing. This seemingly benign choice inadvertently set off a chain reaction where gaming was considered solely the realm of men and where the gamer identity begins to take root. You'll also notice that the majority of ads Nintendo of America ran at this time primarily targeted suburban white males, which consequentially erased people of color from the equation. Though names like Larson, Smith, and Tramis do sometimes show up in video game history books, the contributions of many other black people in the fledgling days of the industry have gone entirely uncredited.
Good job, Nintendo!
Joking aside, I don't think Nintendo of America intentionally wanted this outcome. However, adverts from other publishers continued to double down on these representations for decades because they were emulating that early success, while also pushing the narrative that gamers were special and unique and that games exist solely to cater to them and their fantasy. Even early attempts at focusing on women as protagonists fall a bit short, as they gratuitously sexualize them, like in the case of Tomb Raider's Lara Croft or Metroid Samus Aran. I'm not saying these are bad games or even bad characters. When judged by their own merit in a vacuum, that's most certainly not the case. However, as Paul notes, depictions relay to their audience how to act and what to think about a particular subject. So when the majority of your adverts are celebrating your player base, saying that they can do no wrong, predominantly portraying them as white middle to upper class men, and have scantily clad women as either a selling point or a reward, it's no wonder so many players have adopted such a spoiled, toxic mindset. They've basically been conditioned to think this way. And these issues of discrimination aren't out of nowhere. They are quite commonplace throughout the tech sector's history. As Dr. Kate Miltner of Sheffield University notes, programming was initially seen as secretarial work and assigned to women, and it wasn't until the 60s when employers started to prioritize its value and highlight the autonomy it provided that attitudes began to shift. The women who'd been working in programming were edged out. Not only were their contributions undervalued, but the culture they were working in was unwelcoming to women. And these attitudes still persist to this day. A 2016 research paper from Piaget found that code submitted to GitHub was viewed as inferior once the gender of the writer was revealed to be female. This is despite the fact that they have higher rates of approval. People of color have also struggled to be recognized in tech, such as the contributions of black women in NASA, and tech giants like Google, Apple, and HP refused to publish workplace diversity statistics for years, which points to a major failing in that area. I mention this as gaming is first and foremost a tech industry and has inherited a lot of these problems. In 2015, the International Game Developers Association found that 75% of game developers identify as male, and 76% were white, with many companies pulling almost exclusively from these demographics, which has caused some real issues in the industry. In 2021, Shannon Liao conducted an investigative report on the work culture of Activision Blizzard for the Washington Post. According to one former employee, during her year at Blizzard, she was harassed, underpaid, and on 2 separate occasions groped at company events, and her treatment isn't an isolated incident. Former World of Warcraft quest designer Jennifer Klesing claims that almost every woman she knows at the company has some story about sexual harassment. Going to HR was useless, and even if they did do something, it was often too little too late. From 2018 to 2020, Blizzard only removed 3 senior members who were reported to HR for such behavior, one of whom, Alex Afrazabi, was known to J. Allen Brack, Blizzard's then president, but he only ever offered verbal counseling during multiple conversations with him on the topic. Sick of their treatment, a group of current and former Blizzard employees presented testimony to the Californian Department of Fair Employment and Housing in 2018. Ubisoft employees would even pen an open letter in support of Activision Blizzard's employees, as they suffered similar issues and removed several executives for inappropriate behavior prior to their testimony. And let me just say, you know things are bad when Ubisoft is a moral arbiter. These issues are so widespread in the industry industry that the Activision Blizzard lawsuit was actually inspired by similar actions taken a year prior by employees of another American developer famous for their toxic games. In 2018, Kotaku interviewed 28 current and former Riot employees who described the company akin to a frat house, where women within Riot were constantly passed over for promotions, met with unwanted sexual advances from senior staff, and having their ideas being passed over simply because of their gender. As an employee going by the name Lucy tells Kotaku, after passionately pitching an idea only to have it flop, she'd ask a male employee to pitch the same idea the same way to the same people a few days later, only to be met with a much warmer reception. This culture of misogyny is so pervasive that women meet with it before they even interview for the company. As noted in the article, Riot specifically recruits what they refer to as core gamers, and while they claim this doesn't necessarily mean being fans of their game specifically, the reality is vastly different, as they are known to check candidates' League of Legends stats prior to them entering their campus, which is crazy because you can usually tell how much someone likes League based on their personal hygiene. This has led to a disproportionate amount of women being passed over for employment at Riot, as they don't adhere to the ideal gamer, and this is reflected in a survey conducted by Quantum Foundry from 2015 to 2017, which found that only 10% of MOBA players are women, and in first-person shooters the number is 7%. So it's no wonder 80% of Riot's workforce is male. Even if a woman does pass the Riot vibe check, they're still met with distrust of their credentials. As one employee noted in her 2015 interview, she became so frustrated with her interviewer fact-checking her on World of Warcraft, she considered just letting him log into her account to get past the issue. Two other female candidates were asked if they played real games, even though they were interviewing for positions far removed from game design. Not only has this limited the specific people Riot takes on board, it's actually exacerbated the toxicity within the company. In 2016, Riot surveyed its own employees to study the correlation between in-game and workplace toxicity. It turns out that Rioters who received complaints about their in-game behavior were also awful to work with. According to that study, 25% of employees let go between 2015 and 2016 had unusually high in-game toxicity. This kind of attitude doesn't just further the toxicity inherited from the traditional tech industry and spread it to their fan base, it also actively stifles design of games due to a lack of perspective. I want you to close your eyes while I describe a game or games and tell me what I'm talking about. It's set in a large world that slowly opens up as you play it, with an RPG-inspired leveling system that incrementally improves the combat, and has a crafting system where resources found in the world are used in crafting or upgrading weapons, and adding some form of passive effect. If you guessed Assassin's Creed, you'd be right. You'd also be right if you said Marvel Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Elden Ring, Watch Dogs, Jedi Survivor, Saints Row. He's gonna be there for a while, just leave him. I'm not saying any of these games are bad when judged by their own merit. I've dick-rode like 3 of them on this very channel. However, when viewed as a whole, they show how creatively bankrupt game design has become these last few years. Am I saying a less diverse workforce is the only reason this is happening? No, not even remotely, but it's not helping things. In her video How Greed Ruined Gaming, Gabby Bell notes how the increase in gaming budgets coupled with the amount of time needed to create them has made publishers extremely risk averse. Prioritizing doing what's safe and pleasing shareholders leads to the same games with less and less content being released over and over again. She kinda hit the nail on the head there, and I say this as someone who doesn't particularly like Gabby's stuff, but that's like a whole personal thing and I don't want to get into it right now. Stop holding your fucking mic, Gabby, and buy a stand! You're a singer! You should know this!
You're being incredibly loud.
You just like my volume? Or,
yeah, volume. That's what loud means, doesn't it?
She's also supported by the 2023 article from IGN, which states AAA gaming typically requires an average budget of $200 million. But with marketing costs, bigger releases like GTA can reach up to $1 billion. The same article also puts into perspective 5 years ago, budgets were around $50 to $150 million. So it's no wonder games have become so derivative and safe, which is probably not helped by the fact that their ownership is becoming more centralized, with Embracer Group and Microsoft actively trying to create a monopoly and further diluting creativity in that space. If you need more proof, AAA racing games nowadays are either racing sims or racing sims with less simmy elements. However, back in the PS2, PS3 era, they were some of the most unique games around. Split Second had you driving through cities that were actively falling apart, Driver San Francisco let you possess other cars mid-race, and Burnout actively encouraged you to crash into other people. Even seemingly derivative stuff like Twisted Metal Black and Cell Damage found ways to stand out. One had so much edge it could replace the drummer of U2, and the other was a more cartoon-inspired cel-shaded wacky game. However, these days the biggest deviation is something like Need for Speed Unbounded Spider-Verse style visual effects, but they're so sparingly used they may not as well exist, the cars don't feel like a classic Need for Speed game, and the characters are very designed by a committee to appeal to the youngins. Hell, the most fun I had with that game was making my character look like Gen Z's Cyclops from the X-Men and making him JoJo pose. This insistence of only hiring core gamers and creating such a rigid blueprint for its biggest releases has, much like gaming culture, created an echo chamber where new ideas are rarely if ever adopted because of how uniform its participants and products have become. I mean, how else do you explain Nakey Jakey being able to make 3 different, almost feature-length videos about this very idea, applying it to Rockstar, Naughty Dog, and Bethesda? It even explains why the second something different starts to gain traction outside the AAA space, it changes the whole industry. I call this the Demon Souls effect. As YouTuber Matthew Matosis notes in his video on its namesake, Demon Souls captured audiences because of how antithetical it was to the dogma of game design, amassing a cult following that eventually became one of the most popular game genres to date. This is despite it being considered internally a failed project and being described by Shuhei Yoshida as an unbelievably bad game. And this isn't even exclusive to From Software. More recent releases like Disco Elysium, Hi-Fi Rush, and Among Us have shown that honing a core idea can not only create a much more memorable and interesting experience that the market is severely lacking, but shows that risk and individuality is something that can be financially rewarded. So next time someone says gaming was better in the PS2 days, it's not just nostalgia. They're right. They're just wrong that it's liberals and gays that are currently ruining them. It's capitalism's fault. Besides, I think we've thoroughly established that diversity just makes things better. I mean, they added a black guy to the KKK, and he's like the best one. Speaking of diversity in games, you may have noticed the last few years AAA companies have really pushed for more diverse casts. This should be a good thing. In reality, this recent push is a hollow gesture by the industry so they don't have to change how things are done and can keep pushing out the same slop by introducing new people to games who haven't had to play the exact same open world Ubisoft game so many times, you start to wonder why they even bother changing the title.
Oh my days.
While they are trying their damnedest to attract these new diverse players, they ignore their original audience, may have an issue with them, and in a way, throw them to the wolves. Data from Riot shows new players encountering toxic behavior are 320% less likely to return to the game. While it is cool, some companies like CD Projekt Red or Bethesda have allowed people to play as transgender characters, it only really acknowledges that they exist, which is the bare minimum. It also perpetuates the idea that these people face no additional problems in society because of who they are, which is very much not the case. Many groups are still woefully underrepresented. In 2015, the Houston Press found, excluding customizable and licensed individuals, there has only been 14 playable black women in gaming. I want to make it very clear, this recent push for representation by publishers is bad. Not because it adds more groups to gaming, it's bad because it reduces these marginalized groups that have been undervalued for years into a marketing gimmick, and in the worst cases, it uses them as a shield from criticism. Capcom's defense for recasting Ada in Resident Evil 4 Remake was originally pitched as course correction and to have a Chinese actress play a Chinese American character, but as Gamergate Dalton Cooper notes, it was more likely born from Capcom's desire to avoid hiring union workers, which is so messed up. This is also why people are still so vocal about representation in games. And before you get bent out of shape about it, just know we're never going to lose all the big titty anime waifus, and nor should we. But what people like Anita Sarkeesian are looking for is just more types of people in games, and players are receptive to this line of thinking. Overwatch had a very diverse set of female characters, many of whom were competitively viable. Lady Dimitrescu made audiences thirstier than Lawrence of Arabia, and over 50% of players romance Liara in Mass Effect 1. You know, the bisexual transgender blue alien. Besides, you can have characters that are hot and interesting. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Miranda from Mass Effect 2, Kaine from Nier, Sylvia from No More Heroes all incorporate sexuality really well and in service of their character, rather than just visual dressing. To put it in simpler terms, normalize muscle mommies. Can't we all come together and put aside our differences and do that for this random commenter with great taste? As it stands now, game publishers are just expecting their player base to do all the work and don't acknowledge they play an active role in the toxicity of their games. The AAA space is a vicious cycle where any morals are second only to revenue, and that actively stifles creativity, that doesn't care about the people it pretends to serve or the talent that creates its products. And I know some of you may be pointing out gaming is more profitable than it's ever been, but to paraphrase a buddy of mine, money and quality aren't always friends. I'd probably call it the most evil side of gaming if there wasn't a clearer alternative.
You're wasting my fucking time. You hear me? You know what time is for me? Money. Time is money. I could be in the fucking gym right now getting fucking massive. And here I am, fucking pending install. I'm done with your shit!
Do you ever start something and realize halfway through it may have been a bad idea? F it, we're here now. Streamers, influencers, YouTubers, whatever you want to call them, make up the third piece of this triforce of hate called gaming culture. A prime example being the quartering, aka Jeremy Hambley, probably the purest form of the toxic gamer stereotype that isn't parody. Back in 2019, Hambley got a lot of attention when he discussed GameSpot's review of Days Gone. For those that don't remember the game, don't worry, it has that effect on people. Primarily taking issue with the fact GameSpot had scored the game a 5 out of 10, and that it was judged too harshly with the reviewer having too much of their political ideology in the review. So why did he decide this was a game he had to talk about? Because a woman reviewed it. No, seriously, because a woman, Callie Plagg, reviewed it. So some nerd got angry over something stupid. So what? Well, as Anita Sarkeesian points out to Polygon, when these anti-woke creators make hit pieces like this, they use it as a rallying point to attack the subject. And make no mistake, this was a hit piece against Plagg. Sure, he never tells you where to go, but he makes it very clear by having her in the thumbnail of the video and going to her Twitter and constantly name dropping her that this is who you should be mad about. And trust me, she got the hate. Hamley would also make an additional 3 videos on Plague's treatment, after his video downplaying it and any involvement he may have had in her treatment. He'd also clap back at Dark Viper AU for critiquing him, saying that he's not a reviewer, yet he knows what review scores a game he hasn't played and by his own admission probably wouldn't play should get. But that's Jeremy's brand. He's a Gamergater that never got the message that the movement died, and is all the worst parts of it rolled into one. If I had to put my feelings into song, it might sound a little like this.
You're a loser, baby, a loser, goddamn baby.
If you need more proof of how bad he is, I first encountered the quartering after he decided to defend THQ Nordic for hosting an AMA on 8chan, which was being investigated for hosting child pornography.
Interesting hill to die on, Jeremy.
Also, and this may sound like a joke I would make given my history, but one of the first things you may find googling him is a video of him pissing all over his basement floor during a stream. No, I'm not kidding, that's real. Now, I could go on about Jeremy, but I kinda don't really want to because I've given this guy way too much brain space as it is. And as Ian Sure from CNET notes, he isn't even that unique, as there's a swath, that's a fun word, of angry YouTubers capitalizing on outrage, which YouTube actively promotes. According to the New York Times, 70% of the time spent on YouTube is decided by its recommendation algorithm, which disproportionately promotes more negative content and disincentivizes people from more positive subject matter. Even less controversial creators initially find negative content and titles perform far better than more positive ones, and I am guilty of this too. Some of my more popular stuff has a more negative lean, and I genuinely hate that I have had to feed into negativity to get my content seen. This isn't a recent thing, it's been baked into YouTube gaming since its inception. Early successes like the Angry Video Game Nerd, the Irate Gamer, Spoonie, Angry Joe, the Jimquisition, and Zero Punctuation reveled in outrage, which has influenced attitudes in game culture to this day. We have a whole generation of young kids who were raised on negativity. That was Stephen Williams, aka Boogie2988, who found viral success with his character of Francis the Angry Gamer before he transitioned into more positive content. I wonder what he's up to these days.
I did work in the porn industry for the better part of 7 years, so I mean...
Be real with me. Do you really think it would be a good idea to go to a real interview and reference porn?
It depended on the job, I would think.
What the f happened there? People like Jeremy are bad, and I could go on and on about them for ages, but honestly, I'd be repeating a lot of the first part of this video, and they're not that interesting as people. Why?
'Cause we're boring!
boring! We're so fucking boring!
What is interesting is the many YouTubers and Twitch streamers that pretend to be the opposite of Jeremy, but may as well be just as bad. Game Grumps is a Let's Play channel hosted by former Newgrounds animator Aaron Hansen, aka Egoraptor, and Ninja Sex Party frontman Dan Avidan. Younger viewers may be more familiar with them through TikTok soundbites.
Welcome to the 10-minute Power Hour. I'm Danny. I don't want to do this.
I feel so old. They're a more positive group of creators in the gaming space, being very vocal about gay and trans rights, mental health issues, and are more body positive than a lot of other online creators. And despite all that, they suck! In a stream before creating Game Grumps, Aaron's wife Susie claimed after hanging out with a black guy, Aaron had to drop a series of N-bombs, which she says on stream. She's also tweeted about the behavior of black people in LA, which is a weird thing to say. I mean, that'd be like if Joe Pesci, you know, half the wet bandits from Home Alone, went on national television and threatened to beat a woman for speaking out about the systemic abuse of the Catholic Church she suffered directly from. Anyway, Dan, despite being very vocally pro-women, used to sleep with and ghost fans, with many noting how it heavily leveraged his position in a creepy way and led to grooming allegations. Aaron was accused of bullying Sir Pello for a pretty tame parody he made about Storytime animators, which a lot of his former Newground friends would call him out for. Oh, and he's dropped a few hard N-bombs himself across various videos, which apparently is just one of his favorite things to do. All things considered, it certainly seems like they may not be the nicest people, evidenced further by the company they keep. In 2017, the Grumps launched a D&D podcast, Dragons and Places, the DM being game reviewer and fellow YouTuber Pro Jared. The name may sound familiar, and that's because in 2019, Jared's now ex-wife, Heidi O'Farrell, revealed that he had been involved in a string of affairs and repeatedly gaslit and emotionally abused her during their marriage. She also revealed that he'd been exchanging nudes with fans, leading to grooming allegations that were probably not helped by the fact he was on a Dan Schneider show.
Like gender, age is just another thing on your driver's license.
I feel like he wants to fuck children.
He'd let her clarify on a stream that the individual in question wasn't underage at the time they were soliciting nudes from one another, but just because a crime didn't happen doesn't mean you're not a shithead. In fact, one of the women he had an affair with was Holly Conrad, wife of Game Grumps host Ross Rubber Ninja and his supposed friend. Normal Boots, which Jared had joined in 2014, would part ways with him not long after this. But despite that, they really wanted a controversy hat trick. So in 2023, the completionist, true to his name, stepped up. In an investigation carried out by Some Ordinary Gamer and Carl Jobs, they found that despite yearly events hosted by Gerard Khalil, aka the Completionist, and claims of working with various Alzheimer research institutions, his charity, the Open Hand Foundation, they hadn't donated any of the funds it had raised in like years, so they were just sitting on $500,000. Cool. And I wish the story ended there, but it's not just Game Grumps and associates that are shady. Let's Player Chugga Conroy tried to solicit feet pics from Lady Emily, a fetish he admitted he had to her while he was in a relationship with another woman. So many Minecraft YouTubers have been accused of grooming, you start to understand why they like a game full of creepers. And Channel Awesome allegedly buried evidence on Justin Carmichael, aka G Wario, that included accusations of SA and pedophilia, which would make you wonder why Gamer from Mars put him as his 5th favorite dead YouTuber. Why did you make this, man? In fact, why the hell is it still even up? But why does any of this matter? Well, according to a study by Lego, yes, the toy brick people, as of 2019, a third of children in the US and UK want to be YouTubers when they grow up. These guys have a lot of influence over impressionable young minds and willfully seem to ignore the responsibility that comes with that. It's gotten so bad that even creators on that platform are speaking out about it.
YouTube is like probably one of the most evil platforms in the world because it specifically rewards being terrible and starting fights in a way that is extremely disconcerting for the future of the human race.
I know a lot of this can be hard to hear for fans of the people I mentioned. I get it. I used to be a huge GG fan. Hell, Sequelitis was a major inspiration for this channel. But the fact that so many of their shitty behaviors are publicly documented and most of their fans just deny or rarely mention it means that they let them get away with some really terrible things and they never have to get better. But K-Dog, those are all boring old YouTubers on that cringe shit. What about streamers, Skibbity? For the record, I didn't like that either. But I am glad I asked about it. Let's take a look at good old offline TV. One thing you may have noticed about them is that unlike everyone else I mentioned, their talent isn't just a bunch of boring white dudes, which is great. What isn't great is the massive amount of controversies they've been involved in. In 2020, streamer Fedmeister was removed from the organization and their LA Hype House after sexually harassing house manager Yvonne NG and fellow streamer Lily Pichu. Pokimane would later say in a statement that he had a history of trying to manipulate her relationships, and Lily Pichu would also out former offline TV manager Chris Chan for similar behaviour, which should further cement the idea that we shouldn't trust anyone named Chris Chan. Not too long after, offline TV would release a statement on Twitter in support of their victims. We strive to be a place where everyone can feel comfortable and safe. Really? What about these clips, plural, of Pokey dropping an M-bomb on stream? Here's YouTuber Solo TV reacting to and rating every time she said it.
You ain't funny.
I remember the claps.
Asked. This getting cooked.
It's almost like finding out that Mark Wahlberg, you know, from the Funky Bunch, was linked to several hate crimes. I'm sure glad he's not a monster, even ignoring racism. Which, to be clear, you shouldn't. She's also a massive f***ing hypocrite, criticizing XQC for joining rival streaming site Kick, known for its controversial content and creators, with her prime reason being she has morals and didn't need the money. So why then did you make fun of people for not being able to afford your overpriced cookies, or ignore the fact you indirectly work for Amazon, which is known for its looser employee rights, and a report from Bloomberg found 279,000 children had been targeted by predatory accounts on it, or pirated a bunch of anime leading to companies to crack down on copyright and almost inadvertently costing creators like Totally Not Mark their channel and livelihood? Nice selective morals there, Pokey. It's not just offline TV either. For example, XQC got into a super heated argument on stream with his ex-girlfriend, leading to accusations that he was holding her captive. Or Slicker, a gambling streamer who revealed that he had tricked fans and friends into fueling his gambling addiction. Not so fun fact, all those examples and the Bloomberg report I mentioned came out in the same week. As did this Twitter argument wherein Trainswreck TV accused Mizkif of covering up a sexual assault. After a month, his streamer organization, which had launched an investigation, found no substantial evidence of these claims. So it's kinda interesting that he immediately caught flack in his first stream back since the allegations for making tone-deaf comments about it. I want to be better, not only for myself, but for my audience, and I want my influence on this world to be positive. Maybe, and this is just me spitballing here, Miz, but maybe the issue is you're a massive twat and you always have been. Point in case, IRL streamer Ice Poseidon released chat logs between himself and Miz that showed him using racist and homophobic slurs. No wonder him and Pokey get on so well. And you know what else that's really upsetting? He wasn't the only person accused of covering up SA that week. Streamer Toxic Support revealed how she and a friend attended a TwitchCon party hosted by Irish streamer Justin Minks in 2018. During the party, she and her friend got roped into a drinking game where they were forced to strip down to their underwear. The day after, feeling very uncomfortable with what had happened, she contacted Minks, who listened to her story and was initially supportive. I mean, it makes sense. Minks loves women. Her Twitter says so. So why then did she ignore messages from Toxic for hours, only to finally reply with she wasn't welcome at subsequent parties, and this kind of talk could ruin careers? This really pains me to hear, as Minks is one of the few major Irish streamers, and she really does represent us to a lot of people. I mean, learning this is like learning in the 80s Matthew Broderick, you know, Inspector Gadget, killed 2 women in Northern Ireland. That's real, by the way. Like, let it sink in that Matthew Broderick has killed as many people as O.J. Simpson. According to QT Cinderella on the Fear Ann podcast, Minks is an alcoholic, and she personally cost Cutie $50,000 due to her drunken behavior. But Cutie ain't no saint either. For one, she kinda dragged Minks in a majorly public way despite believing she is an addict. And she got criticized for having adult fan site Fansly sponsor the 2023 Streamer Awards, which many people argued perpetuates Twitch's issues with adult content and was extremely weird given that the event was pitched as an all ages thing. On a personal note, the Streamer Awards are an inherently dumb idea. Does Hassan really need an award for stealing people's content? Sorry, just chatting. I'm pretty sure he's rewarded enough with his 200 grand Porsche, outfits that cost more than some make in a year, and a $3 million house. I'm calling it a house because he gets mad if you call it a mansion, and the last thing I want to do is I don't want to hurt his widow feelings. I could go on and on and on. But I'm gonna end on probably my favorite controversy. In 2023, streamer Atrioc accidentally revealed that he'd visited a site that made deepfake porn of various streamers, aka his friends, including Pokimane, Sweet Anita, and Valkyrae, leading to what I feel is one of the most unintentionally funny videos I have ever seen.
It's just too much information, but I'm the most fucking vanilla guy.
Why is his wife in the background, silently sobbing and saying nothing? It's like he just watched a whole bunch of like politician sex scandal videos and was just like, yes, that. In it, he explains that he accidentally clicked on the site and it had been recommended after he had done a deep dive search on AI, which is why it was in his recommended algorithm, while stressing that his streams have always strived to be a place for women and that misogynistic behavior is met with a ban. Be that as it may, people were quick to point out he was full of shit, as the site in question is paywalled and needs an account to access. So why virtue signal? Well, Associate Professor Jen Golbeck has a pretty good theory. They're narcissists. I mean, you kind of have to be to think you can just make anything and people will watch it. This actually relates to a point raised by Ninja in his masterclass on how to be a streamer. Don't worry, I didn't pay for it, I just watched Drew Gooden's video on it.
It is going to be up to you to instill good morals, or the morals that you have, into your audience.
His wording there is pretty interesting. A lot of these influencers capitalize on an ideal, but as Atrioc shows us, it isn't reflective of their actual values, but the morals and agenda they want to be perceived to push. It's all performative. For example, a lot of them like to pretend that anyone can get to the level they're at, and that is true, but they ignore that it's impossible for the market to support everyone. And Drew actually has a really good point about just this.
So to be someone who already has a net worth of like $50 million, and then you charge all your most hardcore fans off the promise that maybe they'll be famous like you, it's bullshit, man. This sucks.
And yeah, that is the exact product of themselves that they push, that you can be like me, that we're friends, that we're equals, that I'm just like you. That is not the case. No one can casually lose $50,000 or be in a Ryan Reynolds movie. No one could get away with half the shit they have and still be beloved by thousands, no, millions, while shitting out the most copy-pasted content imaginable. This idea isn't just ignorant on their part, it's willfully disingenuous and is teaching a generation of kids all the wrong lessons while exacerbating a culture of hate that has existed in the online gaming space since its inception. I am fully aware that there is hypocrisy here, given that a guy on the internet who talks about games is telling you that other people who do that are bad. No doubt some people are going to think I'm just jealous, and to that I say, yeah, no shit. I would love to be able to hang out with my friends all day and get paid for just playing video games or watching videos, and apparently you don't even have to watch the videos. And I'm not telling you to not think that about me, rather it's you should treat them with as much suspicion as you do me, probably even more so because they have more influence than I ever will. The reality is these creators don't care about anything but themselves, wanting as much attention as possible and as little responsibility for what they do or say. If you need more proof, remember the quartering? I used to think, well, at least he's transparent that he's a shithead. Turns out, he's done this too! His first channel, Clawstruck, was a more positive and family-friendly channel about crane games of all things. But he dropped this almost immediately after the quartering gained attention, which tells me he doesn't even believe what he's saying. He only cares as long as people are listening, and there's something kind of miserable and sad about that. I want to stress something to you. Just because you enjoy gaming or streamers and YouTube doesn't make you a bad person. I enjoy all those things. But willfully ignoring that there are issues and that a lot of problematic people are using the gamer identity to keep them going and are making millions off of that is the real problem. Luckily, there is some good news.
Continue.
According to Reddit in 2022, less toxic gaming or low sodium subreddits had grown 23 times in size. And research conducted by Take This shows tolerance of toxic behavior in younger players is steadily declining. On the development side, call to actions from Roblox and Minecraft to involve parents and gaming communities in teaching younger generations to replicate more positive behaviors and allowing for more human intervention is getting more traction. And Gamergate, while terrible, did prompt companies to create safer and more inclusive spaces spaces through organizations like Girls Make Games and Girls Who Code, where they can actually let their work shine through. And hey, if they can't fix Activision Blizzard, chances are it won't matter, because Microsoft will drive them into the ground. Independent games, where I would argue real innovation is happening, present a better alternative to the current AAA methods. Plus, fighting games like DragonBall FighterZ finally teach new players how to actually play them. I still suck at them, but it's nice to know I'm the issue, not the game. Speaking of self-realization, game publishers are working with influencers to create more positivity in the Twitch and YouTube space, and there are creators making way more thoughtful content that show you can discuss games, good and bad, without having to get nasty about it. That all being said, negativity is something that I don't think will ever go away completely, and it does involve us calling out shitty behavior in people when we see them. Those of us who recognize the problem face an obligation to address them. I've gone back and forth about whether to even make this video, or talking about half this crap. Lord knows, I would much prefer to be talking about Crow Country, which was this amazing Resident Evil throwback horror game, or Melatonin, this really sweet and fun rhythm game, or Penny's Big Breakaway, which is probably the best Spider-Man game I've ever played somehow. But I am just so tired of all this stuff, and I need to get it out. I don't hate games. I love them, and I think they can be a lot better for everyone, and I think they should. Also, on a very personal note, I really don't like this guy. There's only one Hassan we stand in this house, and it's not this guy. It's the old man of the mountain who used the blade of Azrael to inject the concept of death into the goddess Tiamat. Get clowned on, you champagne socialist. Hey, thanks for watching. Been a while since we had one of these talks. How's your mom? Good. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell to stay up to date with all my upcoming videos. I promise the next one won't be so miserable. Maybe it'll be on Sonic the Hedgehog. Maybe it won't. I haven't decided. Alright, I'm gonna go drink some boba now, or not. Check my Twitter to see if I did that. It's in the links below. If you want to see more, I definitely recommend checking out this video I did on Final Fantasy VII and how they made that amazing game. It's not as sad as this one, but it's still kinda sad. Or this one, on how game preservation is slowly killing games. There's no light at the end of that tunnel, but I think it's a pretty good video. It's very hot here right now. Oh, I'm just gonna end it there.